The Velthari Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. They had conquered 47 different species across hundreds of worlds. No one had ever defeated them. No one had ever even come close. On the crystal world of Nexar Prime, the Great Council chambers stretched for miles in every direction. Massive pillars made of pure light held up a ceiling that showed the stars themselves. Representatives from all the conquered species sat in their assigned places. They had learned long ago to stay quiet and obey. High Arbiter Zelthos stood at the center of the chamber. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with scales that changed color like oil on water. 6 eyes studied the holographic display floating before him. Each eye could move on its own, watching different things at the same time. The display showed a small blue planet spinning slowly in the darkness of space. Earth. The humans called it home. The humans have refused our terms, Zelthos announced. His voice echoed through the massive chamber. They will not surrender. A sound like clicking filled the room. It was laughter. The conquered species had learned to laugh at whatever the Velthari found funny. But this time, many of them meant it. The idea of humans fighting back seemed ridiculous. Tactical Overseer Keth stepped forward. He was smaller than Zelthos, but just as deadly. His job was to plan every invasion, every conquest, every destruction. I have completed the full analysis of Earth, Keth said. He waved his clawed hand and the hologram changed. It showed human cities, human weapons, human ships. The humans are a primitive species. They have nuclear weapons, but nothing that can reach orbit effectively. Their nations fight among themselves constantly. They have no unified defense fleet. They have never traveled beyond their own moon. Zelthos studied the information. Your estimate for total conquest? 14 standard hours, Keth replied. And that is being generous. We could likely do it in 6 if we use full force from the beginning. More clicking laughter filled the chamber. 14 hours. Most species fell in 3. The Velthari had expected this would be an easy addition to their empire. Another world of slaves. Another source of resources. Send a fleet, Zelthos ordered. Give them 6 hours to reconsider surrender. After that, begin the conquest. 1,200 Velthari warships waited just beyond Earth's moon. Each ship was massive, larger than anything humans had ever built. Each one carried weapons that could glass a continent in minutes. Each one held thousands of Velthari warriors, ready to take whatever they wanted. The fleet commander, Admiral Veth, received his orders and smiled. This would be easy. This would be fun, on Earth. It was 3:47 in the morning in Washington, D.C., when the transmission arrived. Admiral Nathan Cole stood in the underground command center beneath the Pentagon. The room was filled with screens showing data from every satellite, every listening post, every telescope that humanity had pointed at the sky. Officers from every major nation stood beside him. Americans, Russians, Chinese, Europeans, everyone. For the first time in human history, there were no enemies in that room. Only humanity. Nathan was 52 years old. He had gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many wars. But he had never seen anything like this. None of them had. They are giving us 6 hours to surrender, said Colonel Lisa Martinez. She was reading the translated message on her screen. Her hands were steady, but Nathan could see the fear in her dark eyes. After that, they say they will begin what they call pacification. Pacification? General Viktor Petrov said. The Russian commander shook his head. I know what that word means when an enemy uses it. How many ships? Asked Admiral Chen Wei from China. 1,200 confirmed, Lisa replied. Each one is approximately 2 kilometers long. Their weapons technology is centuries ahead of ours. Maybe thousands of years ahead. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what those numbers meant. Every nuclear weapon on Earth combined would not be enough. Every military force humanity had built over centuries would fall in hours. Maybe minutes. Nathan Cole walked to the center of the room. He looked at the faces around him. He saw fear. He saw despair. But he also saw something else. He saw people who had spent their whole lives protecting their nations. Now they had to protect their entire species. "Get me Director Katie Lawson," Nathan said quietly. "Tell her it is time." Lisa looked up sharply. "Site Omega, sir?" "Site Omega." Several people in the room exchanged glances. Most of them had never heard of Site Omega. It did not exist on any map. It had no official budget. For 80 years, it had been the most closely guarded secret in human history. Colonel Marcus Webb from the British delegation stepped closer. "Admiral Cole, what exactly is Site Omega?" Nathan picked up a secure phone. Before he dialed, he looked at the colonel with something that might have been a small smile. "It is the reason we have been lying to the world since 1947, Nathan said. "It is the reason we are going to survive this." 3,000 miles away, in the Nevada desert. The phone rang in an office 40 miles beneath the surface of the Earth. Director Katie Lawson had been waiting for this call for 11 years. In some ways, humanity had been waiting for it for almost 80. Katie was 58 years old, with silver hair pulled back tight. She had spent her entire career at Site Omega. She had given up a normal life, a family, everything to work on what was hidden in these tunnels. Most people would never know her name. Most people would never know what she had sacrificed. "Director Lawson," she answered. "Katie." Nathan's voice was calm, but she could hear the weight behind it. "They are here. The council has given us 6 hours." Katie closed her eyes for just a moment. She had always known this day would come. Part of her had hoped it never would. But the bigger part of her, the part that had worked 18-hour days for 3 decades, was ready. "The Harbinger fleet is prepared," she said. "All 12 ships are fully operational. Crews are standing by. Can we win?" Nathan asked. Katie looked through the reinforced glass window of her office. Below her stretched the largest underground facility ever built by human hands. Tunnels went on for miles. Laboratories hummed with technology that most humans could not imagine. And at the center of it all, in a hangar carved from solid rock, 12 ships waited in silence. They were not like any ships humans had built before. They were black, angular, designed with knowledge that came from beyond the stars. But they were not copies. They were improvements. Human engineers had taken alien technology and made it better, faster, deadlier. "Director," Nathan's voice came again. "Can we win?" Katie watched as the hangar lights began to power up, one by one, illuminating the weapons that would save or doom their entire species. "The Valkyrie have never lost a war in 12,000 years, she said. "They have conquered 47 species without defeat. They think we are primitive. They think this will be easy." She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as iron. "They have made a terrible mistake. Yes, Admiral, we can win. And we are going to make them remember the name of our world for the rest of their existence." The desert floor began to rumble. Deep beneath the sand, engines that bent the laws of physics roared to life. Humanity's secret was about to be revealed, and the Valkyrie. Dominion was about to learn what happened when they picked a fight with the wrong species. The story of Site Omega began on a summer night in 1947, when something fell from the sky over New Mexico. The official story said it was a weather balloon. The government had lied. What crashed in that desert was a Valkyrie scout ship, the first alien vessel to ever visit Earth. The pilot was dead on impact, but the ship was almost intact. And hidden in its navigation computer was something more valuable than gold or diamonds, or anything humans had ever found. Star charts, weapon designs, the locations of every Velthari military base in their sector of the galaxy, information about 47 conquered species, everything humanity would need to know that they were not alone, and that something was coming. The government created Site Omega within a month. They dug deep, 40 miles beneath the Nevada desert, where no satellite could see and no spy could reach. They gathered the best scientists, the best engineers, the best minds from every field, and they gave them one mission: prepare humanity for the war that was coming. For 80 years, they worked in secret. Director Katie Lawson walked through the main corridor of Site Omega as alarms flashed yellow along the walls. Personnel ran past her, each one heading to their assigned position. They had trained for this moment hundreds of times. Now it was real. Dr. Ryan Mitchell fell into step beside her. He was the chief engineer of the Harbinger program, the man who had turned alien blueprints into human weapons. His hair was wild, his coat stained with grease and coffee, but his eyes were sharp as knives. All 12 ships are showing green across the board, Ryan reported, scrolling through data on his tablet. Power cores stable. Fold drives calibrated. Weapon systems armed and ready. And the quantum disruptors? Katie asked. Ryan grinned. It was not a nice grin. The Velthari designed the original version. We made it about 1,000 times more powerful. One shot will create a chain reaction in their power cores. Their own energy systems will tear them apart from the inside. They reached the main hangar, and Katie stopped to take it all in. Even after 11 years, the sight still took her breath away. 12 ships hung in the massive underground space, each one held in place by magnetic clamps. They were sleek and black, shaped like arrowheads, with no visible windows or openings. Each one was half a kilometer long. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The UES Defiance was at the center, the flagship of humanity's secret fleet. Its captain, Derek Hayes, stood at the base of the boarding ramp, giving final orders to his crew. Derek was 45 years old, with a shaved head and a scar running down his left cheek. He had been a Navy pilot before being recruited to Site Omega 15 years ago. He had spent every day since then training for a war that might never come. Now it was here. Captain Hayes, Katie called out as she approached. Status report. Derek saluted. Old habits died hard. All crew aboard and ready, Director. We can launch in 4 minutes. Make it 2, Katie said. The Velthari fleet is holding position beyond the moon, but they will not wait long. On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew was running through final checks. Lieutenant Megan Torres sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. She was 28 years old, born and raised entirely within Site Omega. She had never seen the sky with her own eyes, but she knew how to fight for it. Weapons online, Megan reported. All 16 quantum disruptor arrays charged and ready. Point defense systems active. Shield generators at full power. Commander Patricia Young sat at navigation. She was older than most of the crew, a former NASA engineer who had helped design the fold drive that made these ships possible. The drive let them travel instantly across vast distances by folding space itself. The Velthari had invented the concept. Humans had perfected it. Navigation locked, Patricia said. Jump coordinates for lunar orbit are set. Ready on your command, Captain. Derek took his seat in the center of the bridge. Around him, his crew waited in tense silence. They had trained for years. They had run thousands of simulations. But nothing could truly prepare them for real combat against an enemy that had never been beaten. Open a channel to Fleet Command, Derek ordered. Admiral Nathan Cole's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, Katie could see the chaos of the Pentagon Command Center. World leaders were arriving. The planet was about to learn a truth that have been hidden for almost a century. "Admiral," Derek said, "the Defiance is ready. All 12 Harbinger ships report green. We are prepared to launch." Nathan nodded slowly. "Captain, in approximately 90 minutes, I will be addressing every nation on Earth. I will be telling them the truth about what we have built, what we are facing, and what we are about to do. Before that happens, I need to know one thing, sir. Your crews, the men and women on those ships. They have trained their whole lives for this moment. Are they ready to fight and die for a world that never even knew they existed?" Derek looked around his bridge. He saw Megan at tactical, her jaw set with determination. He saw Patricia at navigation, calm and focused. He saw his weapons officer, his communications officer, his medical staff waiting below. He saw men and women who had given everything for this moment. "Admiral," Derek said, "we were born ready. Give us the order. We will end this." Katie watched from the hangar floor as the countdown began. The magnetic clamps released with a deep hum. The hangar roof, made to look like ordinary desert from above, began to split open. Stars appeared through the gap, cold and distant and waiting. "Director Lawson," Nathan's voice came through her earpiece. "I never got the chance to thank you. 80 years of work. 3 generations of scientists and soldiers who lived and died in secrecy. You carried that burden when no one else could." Katie watched as the Defiance rose slowly on its anti-gravity drives, its black hull reflecting the hangar lights. "Do not thank me yet, Admiral," she said. "Thank me when it is over. Thank me when humanity is still alive." One by one, the 12 ships of the Harbinger fleet rose through the open ceiling and into the night sky. Their engines glowed with a light that no human eye had seen before this decade. They climbed higher and higher until they were just dots against the stars. Then space folded around them, and they vanished dot in the command center of the Valkyrie fleet. Admiral Veth was enjoying a meal when the sensors screamed a warning. "What is happening?" he demanded, crumbs falling from his mouth. The sensor officer stared at his display with all 4 of his eyes wide with shock. "Admiral, we are detecting 12 vessels emerging from fold space. They are surrounding the fleet. Human vessels?" Veth laughed. "The humans have no fold technology. Check your sensors again." "I have checked 3 times, Admiral. The readings are confirmed. 12 ships, each approximately 500 meters long. Their power signatures are..." The officer paused, his scales going pale. "Their power signatures are unlike anything in our database. They are stronger than our own flagship." Veth stopped laughing. He stood slowly and walked to the main window of his command deck. Outside, he could see the Earth hanging in space, blue and green and completely defenseless. Or so he had thought. Then he saw them. Black shapes against the stars, moving with a grace and speed that seemed impossible. They were everywhere, positioned at perfect intervals around his fleet, each one facing a cluster of Valkyrie warships. "Hail them," Veth ordered. His voice was no longer confident. "Find out who they are." Before his communications officer could respond, every screen on every ship in the Valkyrie fleet displayed the same image. A human male in a black uniform, sitting calmly in a command chair. His face was hard. His eyes showed no fear. "Attention, Valkyrie fleet," Captain Derek Hayes said. "You have entered restricted space. You have 60 seconds to withdraw beyond the Kuiper Belt, or we will consider this an act of war. This is your only warning." The message ended. The screens went dark. Admiral Veth stood in silence for a long moment. Then he smiled. Whatever these ships were, whatever tricks the humans had learned, it did not matter. He had 1,200 warships. They had 12. "All ships," Veth commanded. "Attack formation. Destroy them. 300 Velthari warships broke away from the main fleet and accelerated toward the Defiance. Weapons charging, ready to show these primitive humans what real power looked like. They had no idea what was about to happen. Captain Derek Hayes watched the 300 Velthari warships accelerating toward his position. Each one was 4 times the size of the Defiance. Each one had weapons that could reduce a city to ash in seconds. On paper, they should have been unstoppable. Derek almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Tactical analysis complete. Lieutenant Megan Torres reported from her station. Enemy weapons will be in range in 47 seconds. They are charging their primary energy cannons. Time to quantum disruptor optimal range? Derek asked. 22 seconds, Captain. Derek leaned back in his chair. Around him, the bridge crew worked with calm efficiency. There was no panic, no fear. They had trained for this exact moment for years. Every simulation, every drill, every sleepless night had led to this. Hold position, Derek ordered. Let them come to us. Commander Patricia Young glanced at him. Captain, if we hold position, we will be in their weapons range before we can fire effectively. I know. Derek smiled slightly. I want them confident. I want them to think they have us. On the Velthari flagship, Admiral Veth was indeed confident. His tactical display showed his 300 ships closing on a single enemy vessel. The human ship was not moving, not trying to escape. Either they were fools or their full drive had malfunctioned. Range to target? Veth demanded. 30 seconds to primary weapons range, Admiral. Excellent. Veth clasped his hands behind his back. On my command, all ships fire. I want that vessel reduced to atoms. Let the rest of the human fleet see what happens when they challenge the Dominion. 20 seconds. 15.10. Admiral, the sensor officer interrupted. The human vessel is doing something. We are detecting a massive energy buildup in their forward arrays. Veth frowned. What kind of energy? Unknown, Admiral. It does not match anything in our databases. The readings they are impossible. No ship that size should be able to generate that much power. Fire! Veth shouted. All ships fire now. 300 Velthari warships unleashed their weapons. Energy beams of brilliant blue streaked across space. Enough firepower to glass a continent. Enough to destroy anything that had ever been built. The beam struck the Defiance, and nothing happened. What? Veth stared at his screen in disbelief. That is not possible. Our weapons should have destroyed them 10 times over. On the bridge of the Defiance, Derek watched the shield status indicator. It had dropped by 2%. The Velthari had fired everything they had, and it had barely scratched them. Shields holding at 98%, Megan reported. There was a hint of satisfaction in her voice. The Velthari energy weapons are based on concentrated plasma. Our shields were specifically designed to absorb and redirect plasma-based attacks. 80 years of studying their technology, Derek said quietly. 80 years of learning their weaknesses. They never had a chance. He stood up from his chair and walked toward the main view screen. 300 enemy ships filled the display, still firing uselessly at his vessel. Lieutenant Torres, Derek said, you may return fire. Megan had been waiting for those words her entire life. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision. The quantum disruptor arrays powered up with a sound like reality itself was tearing, firing. A single pulse of energy, invisible to the naked eye, erupted from the Defiance. It was not aimed at a single ship. It was aimed at all of them. The quantum disruptor worked by creating a cascading instability in any energy source it touched. The Velthari ships were powered by containment cores that held massive amounts of energy in perfect balance. The pulse shattered that balance. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the Valkyrie warships began to collapse inward. Their power cores destabilized. Their hulls crumpled like paper being crushed in a fist. Explosions erupted from within, tearing through armor that had never been breached. 300 ships. 4 seconds. When it was over, only wreckage remained. Twisted metal and fading energy, drifting silently through the void. On the Valkyrie flagship, Admiral Veth had stopped breathing. His scales had gone completely white. Around him, his officers stood frozen in shock. "That is not possible," Veth whispered. 300 ships. 300 of our finest warships. Gone in seconds. "Admiral," the sensor officer said, his voice shaking, "the remaining human vessels are moving. They are taking positions throughout our fleet. Each one is targeting multiple ships." Veth looked at his tactical display. The 11 other human vessels had spread out with perfect precision. They were positioned at key points throughout his formation, each one able to fire on dozens of Valkyrie ships at once. He had 900 ships left. They had 11, but he had just watched 300 of his vessels die in 4 seconds to a single enemy vessel. If the other 11 had the same weapons, if they all fired at once— "All ships," Veth ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Full stop. Hold position. No one fires without my direct order." Across the fleet, 900 Valkyrie warships came to a halt. They hung in space, surrounded by black human vessels, waiting to see what would happen next. On Earth, Admiral Nathan Cole watched the battle data streaming across his screens. His hands were shaking. Around him, generals and presidents and prime ministers stood in stunned silence. 4 seconds, Colonel Lisa Martinez said. "They destroyed 300 ships in 4 seconds. And they have 11 more just like it," Nathan replied. "The Valkyrie fleet is holding position. They are not attacking. They are scared," General Petrov said. The Russian commander actually laughed. "The conquerors of the galaxy are scared of us." Nathan allowed himself a moment of hope. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to Captain Hayes. I think it is time to send a message." On the bridge of the Defiance, Derek received the transmission. He read it once, then smiled. "Lieutenant Torres, open a channel to the Valkyrie fleet. And while you are at it, open a channel to Nexa Prime. Open a channel to every ship, every station, every world in the Valkyrie Dominion. I want them all to hear this." Megan worked the controls. "Channel open, Captain. You are broadcasting to approximately 1,400 vessels and 47 inhabited worlds." Derek stood up straight and faced the camera. Behind him, his crew continued their work, calm and professional. "To all vessels and citizens of the Valkyrie Dominion," Derek began. "My name is Captain Derek Hayes of the United Earthship Defiance. What you have just witnessed was not a trick. It was not luck. It was humanity showing you exactly what we are capable of." He paused to let the words sink in. "The Valkyrie High Council predicted our defeat in 14 hours. We have just destroyed a quarter of your invasion fleet in 4 seconds. Our weapons are based on your own technology, but improved, perfected. We have spent 80 years preparing for this moment." Derek stepped closer to the camera. "We do not want war. We do not want conquest. We do not want to rule anyone or enslave anyone. We simply want to be left alone. But we will not be conquered. We will not be enslaved. And if you force us to fight, we will win." He glanced at his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Torres, show them our reach." Across the Valkyrie fleet, every ship suddenly received a detailed schematic of their own vessels. Engine locations, power core positions, shield weaknesses. Every secret the Valkyrie had kept hidden for thousands of years, displayed on their own screens. "We know everything about you," Derek continued. "Every ship design, every weapon system, every world you have conquered, and how you control them. We have had 80 years to study you, 80 years to prepare. Did you really think we would not be ready? The message ended. Silence fell across the Velthary fleet. On Nexar Prime, in the Great Council Chamber, High Arbiter Zelthos watched the transmission with all 6 of his eyes wide open. Around him, the representatives of 47 conquered species were also watching. But they were not scared. They were smiling. For the first time in 12,000 years, they were seeing something they had never seen before. Hope. The message from Captain Derek Hayes spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within minutes, it had reached every corner of the Velthary Dominion, every conquered world, every slave colony, every mining station where broken species labored under the whips of their masters, on the prison world of Kethera 7, where the insectoid Crix had been enslaved for 3,000 years. Workers stopped in the middle of their shifts. They gathered around communication terminals, watching the human captain speak words that no one had dared to speak in millennia. We will not be conquered. We will not be enslaved. On the factory moon of Sigma 9, where the aquatic Delphians had been forced to build weapons for the Dominion, the workers began to whisper to each other. For the first time in their lives, they were whispering about freedom. On 17 different worlds, rebellions began within the hour. High Arbiter Zelthos stood in the council chamber on Nexar Prime, watching his empire begin to crumble. Reports were flooding in from across the Dominion. Uprisings, riots, Velthary, garrison commanders calling for reinforcements that did not exist. How is this possible? Zelthos demanded. His 6 eyes darted from screen to screen, each one showing a new disaster. One species, one tiny planet. How have they done this? Tactical Overseer Keth stepped forward carefully. He had been the one to predict human defeat in 14 hours. Now, less than 5 minutes into the war, he was watching everything fall apart. High Arbiter, Keth said, we must consider the possibility that our analysis of humanity was incorrect. Incorrect? Zelthos turned on him with fury. Incorrect? You told me they were primitive. You told me they had no full technology, no advanced weapons, no unified defense. You told me this would be easy. Their technology was hidden, High Arbiter. They must have been developing it in secret for decades. Perhaps longer. We had no way of knowing. No way of knowing? Zelthos grabbed Keth by the throat and lifted him off the ground. It is your job to know. It is your job to tell me these things before we send our fleet into a trap. He threw Keth to the floor and turned back to the screens. The situation was getting worse by the minute. In orbit around Earth, Admiral Veth was facing a choice. He could order his remaining 900 ships to attack. They would lose, badly. Or he could retreat and face the shame of being the first Velthary commander to run from a battle in 12,000 years. Admiral, his communications officer called out. We are receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Captain Derek Hayes appeared on the screen once more. This time, he was not alone. Behind him, the faces of world leaders from Earth filled the display. Presidents, prime ministers, generals, the entire planet united. Admiral Veth, Derek said, I'm going to give you one chance. One chance that your people never gave to any of the species you conquered. You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet beyond the Kuiper Belt. After that, we will consider your presence in our solar system an act of war, and we will respond accordingly. Veth stared at the screen. His entire body was rigid with rage and fear. You destroy 300 of my ships and then demand surrender? Veth snarled. You are insects. You are nothing. The Dominion will return with 1,000 fleets. We will burn your world to ash. Derek nodded slowly, as if he had expected this response. Lieutenant Torres, he said without breaking eye contact with the screen. "Show the Admiral what we found in the Velthary database 80 years ago." The screen changed. It now showed a star map, but not an ordinary one. This map showed every Velthary military installation in the sector: shipyards, weapons factories, command posts, fleet positions. Every secret the Dominion had kept for thousands of years. "We know where your shipyards are," Derek said calmly. "We know where you build your weapons. We know where your admirals sleep and where your leaders hide. We can reach any of those locations in seconds with our full drives." He leaned forward. "You threatened to return with 1,000 fleets. Here is my response. If any Velthary vessel enters our solar system again, we will not simply defend ourselves. We will come for you. We will destroy every shipyard, every weapons factory, every command post. We will cripple your ability to make war for 1,000 years." Veth felt something he had never felt before. "True fear. You are bluffing," he managed to say. "You do not have the resources to strike our territory." "Shall we test that theory?" Derek asked. "My weapons officer informs me that our full drives can reach your primary shipyard at Nexar Prime in approximately 7 seconds. Would you like a demonstration?" The screen changed again. Now it showed a real-time sensor image of the massive Velthary shipyard orbiting Nexar Prime. Hundreds of warships under construction. The heart of the Dominion's military power. "We've been watching you for 80 years, Derek continued. "We know every weakness, every vulnerability. We know that if we destroy the Nexar shipyard, it will take you 500 years to rebuild your fleet to its current strength." On Nexar Prime, High Arbiter Zelthos was watching the same transmission. His scales had gone completely pale. Around him, the council chamber was in chaos. Representatives of the conquered species were no longer sitting quietly. They were standing. They were talking to each other. They were looking at their Velthary masters with new eyes. Eyes that held no fear. "Admiral Veth," Derek said, "you have 55 minutes remaining. Withdraw your fleet or suffer the consequences. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended. Veth stood alone on his command deck, surrounded by officers who would not meet his eyes. Outside the window, the Earth hung in space, blue and peaceful and impossibly dangerous. "Admiral," his second-in-command said quietly, "what are your orders?" Veth closed all 6 of his eyes. He thought of the 300 ships burning in the void. He thought of the black human vessels that could tear his fleet apart in seconds. He thought of the shame he would face if he retreated. Then he thought of the alternative. "All ships," Veth said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth, "fall back to the Kuiper Belt. Prepare for full jump." "We are leaving?" "But Admiral, the High Arbiter will—" "The High Arbiter is not here," Veth roared. The High Arbiter did not watch 300 ships die in 4 seconds. The High Arbiter did not see what these humans are capable of. If he wants to fight them, he can come here and do it himself. He turned and walked off the command deck without another word. On Earth, the news spread instantly. The Velthary fleet was retreating. For the first time in 12,000 years, the great conquerors of the galaxy were running away. In the Pentagon Command Center, Admiral Nathan Cole sat down heavily in his chair. His hands were still shaking, but now it was with relief rather than fear. "They are leaving," Colonel Lisa Martinez said, her voice thick with emotion. "They are actually leaving. Total engagement time?" Nathan asked. Lisa checked her data. 4 minutes and 37 seconds from first contact to retreat order. 4 minutes, Nathan repeated. He laughed, a sound of pure disbelief. They predicted 14 hours. We ended it in 4 minutes. Around the world, people were celebrating. They had not yet learned the full truth about Psi Omega or the Harbinger fleet. They did not yet know how close they had come to extinction. All they knew was that something had threatened their world. And somehow, humanity had won. But in the quiet corners of power, where the real decisions were made, leaders were already thinking about what came next. The Valkyrie would not stay defeated forever. They would rebuild. They would plan. They would return. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready. Again. 6 months had passed since the battle that changed everything. The galaxy was a different place now. The Valkyrie Dominion, which had stood undefeated for 12,000 years, was falling apart at the seams. Rebellions burned on every conquered world. Slave colonies broke their chains. Species that had forgotten the meaning of freedom were learning it again. And at the center of it all stood humanity. High Arbiter Zelthos walked through the halls of the council chamber on Nexa Prime. But he was no longer walking as a ruler. He was walking as a prisoner. Energy chains bound his wrists. Guards walked on either side of him. Not Valkyrie guards. Krix guards. The insectoid species his people had enslaved for 3,000 years. The chamber itself had been transformed. The seats were still there, but they were no longer arranged around the Valkyrie throne. Now they formed a circle, with representatives from all 47 formerly conquered species sitting as equals, and at the center of that circle sat the human delegation. Ambassador Samantha Blake was 51 years old, with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen the worst of human conflict. She had spent her career believing that humanity was alone in the universe. Now she was leading negotiations that would reshape galactic civilization. High Arbiter Zelthos, Samantha said, as the former ruler was brought before her. You stand before this council accused of 12,000 years of conquest, slavery, and genocide. How do you respond? Zelthos looked around the chamber. He saw faces that had once trembled at his name. Now they looked at him with contempt or pity or cold satisfaction. The universe had turned upside down, and he was at the bottom. I did what any species would do, Zelthos said, trying to keep his voice steady. The strong rule. The weak serve. This is the natural order of things. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Delphian representative, a tall aquatic being with shimmering scales, rose from her seat. For 3,000 years, my people built your weapons, she said. We labored in your factories while our children were taken as hostages. We watched our culture die, our language forbidden, our history erased. And you call this the natural order? The Krix representative clicked his mandibles angrily. My species was bred in captivity to work your minds. We never knew freedom. We never knew what it meant to choose our own path. Generations of my people were born and died as slaves. One by one, representatives from the conquered species stood and spoke. They told stories of suffering, of loss, of hope destroyed. 12,000 years of pain poured out in that chamber. Zelte and Joes listened in silence. For the first time in his long life, he was forced to truly hear what his empire had done. When the testimonies were finished, Samantha Blake stood. The Valkyrie Dominion is dissolved, she announced. Her voice was calm but firm. Your military assets will be redistributed to the species you conquered, under the supervision of a new galactic council. Your worlds will remain your own, but your empire is finished. Zelthos stared at the human woman with something he had never felt before. Genuine fear. Not of death, but of irrelevance. Of being forgotten. How? He demanded. You were primitive. Our projections, our calculations, they were perfect. How did you defeat us in minutes? Samantha leaned forward, and for a moment, Zelthos saw something ancient in her eyes. Something that had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the brink of self-destruction. Your calculations measured our technology, she said. Our weapons, our ships. You measured everything except the one thing that mattered. And what was that? Us. Samantha stood, and the representatives of 47 species rose with her. You measured what we had. You never measured what we are. Humanity does not surrender. We do not break. When our backs are against the wall, we do not collapse. We evolve. We overcome. We win. She paused, letting the words sink in. Your projections gave us hours. You should have given us centuries. Even then, it would not have been enough. Zelthos was led away in chains. The chamber erupted in conversation as the representatives began planning their new future. For the first time in 12,000 years, they were making their own choices down in orbit above Nexer Prime. The 12 ships of the Harbinger fleet maintained their silent vigil. Captain Derek Hayes stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking down at the world where history was being made. Lieutenant Megan Torres joined him. She was still not used to seeing the stars with her own eyes. After spending her entire life in Site Omega, the universe seemed impossibly vast. Hard to believe it is over, she said quietly. Derek shook his head. It is not over. Not really. The Velthari are finished, but there are other powers out there. Other threats we do not even know about yet. This was just the beginning. Do you think we can handle it? Whatever comes next? Derek thought about the question. He thought about the 80 years of secret preparation, the generations of scientists and soldiers who had given their lives to this moment, the billions of humans on Earth who had never known how close they came to extinction. We survived an ice age with nothing but animal skins and stone tools, he said. We built civilizations, destroyed them, and built them again. We split the atom and walked on the moon. We found alien technology and improved upon it in ways its creators never imagined. We are stubborn, creative, and absolutely refuse to die. He turned to face Megan with a small smile. Whatever comes next, we will handle it. That is what we do. Back on Earth, life was slowly returning to normal. The truth about Site Omega had been revealed, carefully and gradually, to a world that was still trying to process what had happened. Some people were angry about the secrecy. Others were grateful. Most were simply amazed. Admiral Nathan Cole had retired from active duty. He spent his days at a small house on the coast, watching the ocean and thinking about all the people who had made this moment possible. The scientists who had cracked alien technology, the engineers who had built impossible ships, the soldiers who had trained in darkness for a war that might never come. They would never get the recognition they deserved. Most of them were dead now, their sacrifices known only to a handful of people. But because of them, humanity was still alive. Director Katie Lawson had also retired, though she still consulted for the newly formed Earth Defense Council. Site Omega was being expanded, its mission no longer secret. Humanity was building more ships, training more crews, preparing for the next challenge. One evening, Katie received a visitor at her home in New Mexico. Samantha Blake had returned from Nexer Prime with news of the new galactic order taking shape. The Council wants humanity to take a leading role, Samantha said as they sat on Katie's porch, watching the sunset. The other species, they see us as liberators. They want us to help them build something new. Katie nodded slowly. And what do you think? I think we need to be careful, Samantha replied. We defeated the Velthari because we prepared for 80 years. We knew exactly what we were facing. The galaxy is full of unknowns. We cannot afford to be arrogant. We also cannot hide anymore, Katie said. The universe knows we exist now. There is no going back to secrecy. They sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had not found that crashed ship in 1947? Samantha asked. Katie thought about it. She thought about a world that had never prepared, never built Site Omega, never created the Harbinger fleet. A world that had faced the Veltari invasion with nothing but nuclear weapons and prayer. We would have fallen, she said simply. Just like the 47 species before us. We would have been conquered and enslaved and forgotten. But we were not. No, we were not. Katie smiled slightly. Because a scout ship crashed in the desert, and humans found it. And instead of panicking, we started planning. 80 years of planning for a war we hoped would never come. She looked up at the stars, at the vast unknown waiting out there in the darkness. The Veltari thought they understood us. They read our history. They saw our wars, our cruelty, our divisions. And they thought that made us weak. They never understood that it made us survivors. We fight each other because we never learned how to stop fighting. But when something threatens all of us, we fight together. And when we fight together, we are unstoppable. Above them, the stars burned cold and distant, full of mysteries and dangers and possibilities. Out there, the galaxy was changing. Old powers were falling. New alliances were forming. And at the center of it all, a species that had been dismissed as primitive was reshaping the future. The universe had sent its conquerors. Humanity had sent them home. And now, for the first time in 12,000 years, the stars belonged to everyone. The war that was supposed to last hours had ended in minutes. But humanity's journey among the stars was only beginning.